Good Friday morning, everyone. And this is sort of the second recovery day Constance and I are experiencing. We got our COVID booster shot on Wednesday, and I'm happy to report that we're both feeling much better and just a little bit, in need of self-pampering. So we're going to play it out for all it's worth. I just got back from the coffee shop. We're off to a kind of a late start, and I wanted to keep my morning walk in. And I'm just back with my coffee. It's very cold outside, relatively speaking. And I wanted a sip or two while it was still warm. Anyway, I'm going to just talk briefly today about my friend and my old dear teacher and mentor and really first magical teacher that I had, Phyllis Seckler. And many of you know Phyllis Seckler by her magical name, Soror Merel. And she was very instrumental in, along with Grady L. McMurtry, in rescuing, if you is a good word, I would say, the Ordo Templi Orientis, rescuing OTO from extinction after the death of Karl Germer. I don't know how many of you know or even care about such things, but the OTO, as we know it today, the functioning organization with lodges all over the country and all over the world. I don't quite a few grand lodges all over the world. Wasn't really a very active functioning organization. Indeed, at the time of Crowley's death in 1947, there was, to my knowledge anyway, only one operating lodge of OTO or OTO body, and that was in at that time in Hollywood, California. And they were the Agape Lodge, and they were very supportive of Crowley, or as much as they could be during the war years and his last years. And Agape Lodge was led by Wilfred Smith for a number of years. He started out in Vancouver and was a disciple of Frederick Codd also. And he and his wife moved down to Southern California and had a lodge in Hollywood. And when he stepped aside, the new lodge master for a time was Jack Parsons. Yes, Jack Parsons, strange angel Jack Parsons, crater on the moon named after Jack Parsons. And so the lodge ran out of the Parsons estate. Jack inherited quite a large home in Pasadena, California, which is now the campus, as I understand, of a Christian university. I forget what the name of the university is, but which is very ironic. Nevertheless, and Phyllis was an active member, indeed a resident member of the Agape Lodge there in Pasadena, and so was Grady L. McMurtry. Okay, and so they go way back. And Crowley was alive during those days, and Crowley was trying to get a feel for what was going on in his name in in California. He was tickled that they were doing mass and initiating. I believe I'm not sure that I think they initiated up to second degree with formal ceremonies, but most everybody was just a Minerval. But they regularly celebrated Gnostic Mass, and they were uh, uh, as far as anybody could be in those days. They were a pretty good uh, foot forward for Thelema. They didn't do much in the way of publishing or anything like that. Crowley was still alive. Um, and it was in a difficult Red Scare, McCarthy era uh, times uh, in the late 40s and early 50s. And of course, they raised the attention of the FBI and things like that. And of course, Jack was had security clearances up the had security clearances and things like that, and worked on proprietary jet propulsion stuff. So it was a very interesting time with the government and the FBI and Crowley still having the terrible, terrible reputation of a satanic thing, and because uh, I believe the newspapers even called the Agape Lodge the Purple Cult or something like that, because they were so attached to Crowley and his sexual liberation kind of stuff. But when Crowley died, the leadership of the OTO uh, fell to Karl Germer, who was the uh, Grand Treasurer General of the order. Uh, and Karl chose. Uh, Karl was a student of Aleister Crowley, but he wasn't involved in OTO matters. Okay. As far as I'm aware, Karl never uh, uh, participated in OTO initiations, Minerval first, second, third. Karl was a ninth degree of the OTO, but that was a degree conferred upon him on site, I guess the Masons would call it, by Crowley, because it concerned personal work that Karl was doing that related to the ninth degree techniques of the OTO. So, but he chose not to initiate anymore in the OTO and focus on publishing, which we can argue back and forth if that was the supreme wisest thing to do at the time, or whether it was uh, unwise for him to in a sense strangle the OTO as an initiatory uh, body, a functioning public body. Anyway, when the order ceased to initiate, well, Karl still lived, and when he died, which is a very interesting story in and of itself, when he died, the order was or Grady L. McMurtry, who visited Crowley during World War II and was made a ninth degree by Crowley during World War II, and had given Grady's letters of authorization for when if he survived World War II and went back to California, letters of authorization authorizing him Grand Inspector General, which is a degree in the OTO, uh, to report back on what was going on in California, and giving him letters of authorization that in an emergency that he was to take over leadership of the OTO. That's all on paper and on letters, and nobody argues with that at all. Uh, Carl's death was considered that emergency, and Grady, with the help of Phyllis Seckler, Soror Merel, uh, who Grady came out to California, got together with Phyllis. They married, and they got the OTO going again. It's a wild and wonderful story, really. And Grady, first of all, arranged to have the Thoth Tarot photographed and published, and which was a very wise thing. He saw that as a magical act in and of itself, and Grady got uh, support from both Gerald York in England, Crowley's student and colleague, and from Israel Regardie here in the United States. He considered those two individuals the eyes of the left and right eye of Horus. He called it. But anyway, on that Thoth tarot deck, they put the post office box of the OTO in Dublin, California, just down the road a piece, and which was their home. Okay, but the post office box in the town, that was their home. Saying if you're interested in the OTO, contact this post office box. Well, I had the Thoth Tarot because I had been studying with the BOTA, and I wrote them. And I write about it, and I write about my initiation. And I've told the story in various ways here in my morning show. But I thought I'd share it with you today because some of the material I use as an introduction to Dr. David Shoemaker's marvelous book about Phyllis Seckler, or Soror Merel. So here's what I wrote. It sounds so adventurous here. I met her first in the fog-shrouded early morning hours of November 15th, 1975, at a motel in Dublin, California. I'd traveled all night by bus from Costa Mesa. It had not been a restful journey. All I could think about for every bumpy mile was the initiation I was scheduled to undergo and the curious circumstances that brought me to this moment in my life. It had taken nearly 2 years of handwritten letters back and forth, letters demanding the location, date, and hour of my birth, my biography, my education, my aspirations. Finally, a date was set for my initiation, and my instructions were clear, simple, and utterly terrifying. As the bus neared Dublin, I was to tell the driver I wanted to be let off at a particular intersection near a certain motel. I was to walk a few blocks to the motel and check in using my own name. If there were no rooms available, I was to wait in the lobby. If there was a room available, I was to go there and wait to be contacted. I had no other information, no address, no phone number. I didn't even know the names of my hosts and initiators, only magical names. Hymenaeus Alpha 777 and Soror Merel. Now, there was very good reasons at that time for them to be so cautious. This was the time period when reaction against the so-called hippie movement that sort of grew out of the anti-war movement in the psychedelic 60s. And there was a reaction to it from law enforcement and the press because of the Manson family, and because even before the Manson family, there was a scandal about a hippie group in the desert near Barstow, I believe, that were arrested, or a warrant put out for them for abusing a child, a young boy, and putting him in a the press said was a box out in the sun. Uh, Actually, if it was the story, came out that he wasn't put in a box in the sun, that he had the day before, several days before, had been playing with matches and burned down a building on the property, set fire to a building, and destroyed all the contents. And he was, as punishment, he couldn't go out and play during the day. He had to stay in the shade of one of the other buildings. And as far as I know, he was never put in a box. And when the police came to investigate something else, they saw him there, and he said, "No, they're punishing me because and they. But anyway, there was scandal. And that scandal was connected directly to Aleister Crowley, because that was a hippie bandit group, if you will, that had burglarized the home of Israel Regardie and the home of Carl Germer. And they had stolen Crowley property, stolen OTO property, and they absconded with it and fled to Mexico. And there was a trial, and it was a hippie scandal. Okay, and there was a hippie scandal that had a connection to Aleister Crowley, the infamous Aleister Crowley. It was a very, very awkward time to be resurrecting a legitimate Aleister Crowley OTO. But there we are in 1975. That's why they were so cautious. As I looked out the bus window, and the bus went up Interstate 5. I don't know if you've ever been on Interstate 5, either in the daytime or the nighttime. It's like crossing the abyss. It is awful. Okay. As I looked out of the bus window at the cold moon rising over the abyss that is the San Joaquin Valley, it occurred to me that should I fall victim of foul play, I would vanish from off the face of the earth. If my initiators were the insane remnants of some satanic Aleister Crowley cannibal cult, should they choose to rape me, kill me, and eat me, something I was not completely convinced was not part of the program, My poor wife wouldn't even have a clue to give the police. I didn't know it at the time, but Hymenaeus Alpha and Soror Merel were having their own doubts and fears about me, and that the reason for all the cloak and dagger dramatics was the very real concern that I might be a dangerous person. In the months prior to my initial inquiry, note, some very scary things had taken place in California. The homes of several prominent people, elderly former students of Aleister Crowley, had been burgled, and their priceless collection of Crowley books and magical articles stolen. The neon sign in front of the motel beamed a welcoming vacancy. Actually, I think it was blinking agency, because the V was out, I think. And shortly after I awakened the poor manager and checked in, I found myself stretched out comfortably on the top of a not-so-hard bed. I immediately fell asleep and dreamed the most disturbing dream of saggy-titted old women with poorly dyed red hair and preopic old Englishmen in goat leggings carving up my raped and murdered body and devouring my limbs with mint sauce. Then I heard the words, Lon, or the word. I heard a woman's voice, distinctly and forcibly calling out my name. I woke up and jumped off the bed. Coming! I shouted through the door. I tidied my shirt a bit and popped a mint in my mouth and opened the door. There was no one there. I stepped out and looked in both directions. No one there. Somewhat shaken, I returned to my room and sat down on the edge of the bed. Things were starting to get uncomfortably magical. I heard that voice as loudly and as clearly as if someone were standing right outside the door. I was hesitant to try to go back to sleep, but eventually stretched out again. As soon as my head hit the pillow, the phone rang, irritatingly loud. I picked up before it could wound my ears a second time. Hello, I answered, almost as a question. And then I heard, Lon DuQuette? And she pronounced it correctly, too. It was the same voice. It was the voice of the woman who wasn't at the door. By now, I wasn't surprised at anything that was happening. Yes, I said. Have you eaten? No, I confessed. She didn't sound like a cannibal. No, I admitted. Have you? Okay, I didn't know it at the time, but it is in many, 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 many cultures, including American etiquette. It is the first proper thing you ask a guest. Have you eaten? And it was the most charming thing for her to say. And shame on me for thinking she was talking about eating me. But I digress. About a half hour later, a knock on my door told me of flesh and blood Soror Merel was on the threshold. When I opened the door, we both heaved a sigh of relief. I, because she was not a saggy-titted old woman with poorly dyed hair, and because I did not appear at the door with a butcher knife and an I am the Antichrist tattooed on my forehead. She took me to her home, a gingerbread house. A place I can only describe as a magical gingerbread house, surrounded by beautiful gardens. The rooms were full of art and books and comfortable furniture. I was very relieved. She was wonderful, knowledgeable, and wise. I bombarded her with questions that she answered candidly. Our conversation naturally turned to the subject of Liber Al Vel Legis, or the Book of the Law. A year or so earlier, I had followed the instructions, or at least I thought I followed the instructions, laid out in the Class A comment on the text. I destroyed my first copy of the book after the first reading. I asked her, why did I have to destroy my copy of the Book of the Law after first reading? And her answer was this: you've got an obedience streak in you, dear. You're going to have to watch that. I had found my teacher. Phyllis Seckler would be my formal AA contact and also my dear sister in the OTO, which led at the time by her husband, Grady L. McMurtry, Caliph Hymenaeus Alpha 777. I would take my first two OTO initiations, my Minerval and my first degree, in their home in Dublin in 1975, and then 6 months later in 1976. Shortly after my first degree initiation, I wrote a little poem called The Water Closet, or the Caliph's Advice, which I wrote to immortalize this answer to my question. I asked Grady this: what advice can you give a young magician first starting out on the path? He answered with a cavalier lilt to his voice, I asked Crowley the same thing the first time I met him. He simply said, try to visit the water closet whenever you can. You never know when you'll get a chance again. Phyllis was kind enough to, and for OTO members, you might catch the irony of his reference to the water closet, which is in UK they call the toilet, but the sort of play on words in reference to circumstances of your first degree too. Phyllis was kind enough to publish it in an issue of her marvelous magazine, In the Continuum. I'm afraid it might not make too much sense to those unfamiliar with the Man of Earth degrees of the OTO, but for those of you who are, I hope you very much enjoy it. Okay, Love is the Law, Love Under Will. Now, I wrote this in 2012 for my friend David Shoemaker's book. And I have the poem here, and I annotated the poem with, you can't see it here because the Hebrew font didn't, I had little notes along the side, like in imitation of some of Crowley's magical poems. Here's the poem. Adepts and Mahatmas dance widder shins while they devil and beast and ozit. An aspirant's day mysteriously begins with a visit to the water closet. Forefinger on left nostril, thumb on its mate. He blows out his air and he draws it. With postnasal drip, pranayama is great while sitting in the water closet. In Mass 44, okay, Mass 44 is the Mass of the Phoenix, okay, and 44, it's called 44 because the word for blood in Hebrew is spelled Dalet Mem, DM. And so I'm talking about the Mass of the Phoenix, where a small amount of blood is raised from your chest, and I've talked about it before. It's supposed to be a tiny amount, but if you're a young fool, you do it too much, and okay. So in Mass 44, inflamed he prays so deep that he had to gauze it. I wish this was an exaggeration. A comfort to know repairs can be made by a visit to the water closet. You dash to the medicine cabinet, actually. Okay, here's how it ends. Hanged man, okay, that's water. Noah's Ark, Osiris and Seth. The murder of Osiris, and he's afloat on the, okay. Hanged man, Noah's Ark, Osiris and Seth. Effect, and all things which cause it. How much like birth, how very much like death, is a visit to the water closet. Okay. That's my, I'm sure, repeat story of the genesis of Lon in the OTO and AA. Anyway, I hope that's been at least entertaining. Tomorrow there'll be Saturday morning cartoons if Constance and I continue to recover. Until then, continue to be good to yourself and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.